Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Full Blast. I am your host, Raja Burrows. We got another spicy one today. We got and I'm particularly. I mean, V is back. We love V, but I'm particularly excited about today's conversation because I think that it's something that is worth re-examining because I feel like we're talking about alphaness, which is in and of itself a really loaded term.
We should address that. Yeah, it absolutely is.
Right, it's a very loaded term, and I say that as somebody who is currently wearing a backwards baseball cap and like cuffs, and I get the loaded, right? But I think it's a particularly important thing for us to talk about in 2021. Because I feel like a lot of the tenets of alphaness and how it impacts objective personality for like the co-creation of like alphaness as a concept in the early stages of OP, right? That connection is really clear. But OP has evolved. The science has evolved. The terms are more clear. And I think it's really important to update our personal understanding of alphaness in relation to what OP is now.
So question, do you think it's that the terms are more clear, or that because we've been in the community, we've had ops in our lives for more than 3 years now, that our understanding of the terms has deepened enough where we own it for ourselves rather than echoing what Dave and Shan say?
No, because there have been enough. I've been in the community for 3 years.
Yeah.
The quality of the videos and the quality of the information in the videos in the first year and year and a half,
coming from Dave and Shan.
Yes. Yeah. It was contradictory. It was kind of watery. I remember one of the big refrains was, we are 3 to 6 months ahead of the community. Everything the community is discovering, we only just discovered that ourselves. So there really was a continuing evolution and process beyond just the explaining of it, but the actual codifying of like, what do we mean by masculine sensory? How can we track masculine sensory in reality beyond,
it feels like this.
If I see enough feminine intuition and I don't see enough feminine sensory to say that this person has feminine sensory, so I'm going to allege masculine sensory, right? Whereas now those terms are much, much clearer. We are looking for this. We're looking for a specific cadence in the speech. We're looking for tracking.
That's an excellent point.
When did things happen versus detail recollection is more of a visual thing, whereas the masculine sensory knows this happened in October, this happened in August.
And I think that's also like a byproduct, a very direct and probably intentional byproduct of, it's the same effect as like, when they started out, why does traditional MBTI not really have any grounding in reproducibility, is because so many understandings are held in someone's head rather than having concrete definitions. And for a while, Dave and Shan, they were aligned on certain things, but they had vague understandings that were held in their own heads, and forcing themselves to share it with the community, forced them to be more clear about, well, what is masculine sensory? How can I communicate this? How can I define this clearly?
Yes. And similarly, I think that, I remember the earliest OP videos were about the hero's journey. It was about them laying that groundwork and I'm
trying to remember. I remember they did a whole series on his hero's journey, but that was like a year in.
No, they did the whole series about a year in. But I would say it was like videos 2 and 4.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is basic. They're like, here's the 9-minute version of how the hero's journey works. It was that kind of a thing.
I feel like that's like Dave's favorite blaster lesson.
Yes. Right. So that has been, and not just that. So when I was thinking about what do I want to, because we're going to talk about a lot of different Alphaness things.
Yeah.
The thing that I really want to talk about, and it's something that I have very strongly questioned and pretty robustly changed my position on compared to the beginning, is they're not just talking about the hero's journey. There are a lot of hero's journeys, right? Happy Gilmore is actually my favorite example of a cinematic hero's journey.
Oh my God, I haven't thought about Happy Gilmore in decades.
Okay, so Happy Gilmore, it's a delightful movie. It turns 25 this year.
Wow. Oh my God.
But
I feel like that's primo Adam Sandler. Sorry.
Yes. Okay, so it works. I think that Happy Gilmore works better than Billy Madison because it adheres more strictly to the hero's journey beat. And it's almost like, I mean, I have not met Mr. Sandler, but if I ever do get the opportunity to meet him, one of the things that I'm going to ask him is like, when you were developing this, it maps onto the hero's journey to such an intense, deliberate degree, even to the point of the mentor dying halfway through, which forces Happy out of his the last of his nonsense and to learn the exact lesson and to see the park, whatever the radio tower, the camera tower is mirrored the thing. Like, it's so sensory specific onto the hero's journey. And it works because, yes, it's primo Adam Sandler, but there's such a through line there. But that hero's journey energy is vastly different from The Matrix. And The Matrix is very explicitly their hero's journey example.
You mean Dave and Chance?
Dave and Chance. Okay. They go back to The Matrix a lot. And again, in the earliest versions, when they did their big series of like...
Well, I mean, it also, it tracks to Ops specifically because so much of it is about like accepting that your reality is not what you think it is, right? Which is like a very core tenet of Ops is like, no, this is just your brain fucking with you.
Right. And that's the part where I'm like, now that I have a better understanding of Ops, but I've also grown as a person and have used Ops, the biggest part about Alphaness in relation to the hero's journey, in relation to Ops, that I really, really want to question is this idea of the real world being bleak and harsh.
Oh.
I really want to question that premise.
That's not a premise that I ever, I guess, adopted into my understanding, but that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Right? And there's this idea that I have felt that other people I've talked to have also felt a similar energy of like, there's this idea of like townsfolk land is happy, like you're stupid and happy in townsfolk land. And once you make the choice to live in the real world, you are opting into a world of suffering and pain. And
so that's actually, yes.
Okay, go on.
So there's two things that I want to throw out here. One, that is one of the most fundamental areas where I strongly disagree with Dave and Chan.
Yep.
So that's an area I definitely, I think, will probably be a lot of our discussion. But then the other thing I want to just quickly put out there, because we are, a pair of double deciders. So I want to say that, like, I love Dave and Chan. I love what they've put out there, and I love what they do, and I'm really grateful for what they do. And I think in this conversation, you and I are probably going to be disagreeing with a lot of their content on this. That does not in any way, for any deciders out there or anybody else, that does not in any way mean that I think you as well don't like them in any capacity just because I disagree with them.
Right. Well, and also I want to say that all of the disagreements, because at some point I'm going to pop off. Like, there's no way for me to not pop off at some point during this discussion. But
what do you mean pop off?
Like, I'm gonna rant at some point about something.
Exactly.
And I'm gonna start ranting, and I know that I'm gonna do this. But I want to be very clear that the things that I disagree with are specific to the narrative, the concept of alphaness, the worldview kinds of stuff, and is not that I disagree with how they define their terms. The more scientific side of objective personality, the like, well, I think that FI is actually that. No, I am very, very aligned with Dave and Shan.
With their definition of terms.
With their definition of terms. My disagreement comes in the application of those terms outside of a scientific context.
Yes. I think on the whole, they have a very strong, like, and I think this is the idea that kind of spurred us, like, hey, we should do an episode on this.
Yeah.
Was this idea of like, a lot of what I hear from them in terms of their philosophy of like, okay, so how do you engage in this growth? How do you go on your journey? Is this element of moving towards the pain and that like forcing yourself. And it's a lot of this like heavy pressure related things. And I don't think that is the only mechanism forward. Right. And I might even argue that that's not the best mechanism forward. And I think that's one of the core tenets where I disagree with them.
Yeah. And again, I am firmly of the belief that do what works for you.
Yes.
Right? Because I do know people on the other side who are like, you know what? I actually really did need to kick my ass a little bit. And I'm glad that I am glad that I chose to be harder on myself in bursts. And that really helped me. And now I understand, like, oh, these are the ways in which I did need to legitimately toughen myself up. Yes. Because it was keeping me from being able to engage in the world in a, grateful, wise, and courageous sort of way. Right? But it is certainly not the only.
But it's like the loving parent, right? You have a loving parent that sometimes you just need to. You can have a parent who is loving, supportive, encouraging, and sometimes you just need to be a little like, okay, no, right now this isn't okay, right? Yeah. Which is very different from a parent who's constantly like slave driving or like, no, you have to keep doing this, or like is coming at it from a place of like if the child is afraid of disappointing their parent versus the child really feels safe enough to explore and try things. Yeah. Those are very different dynamics.
Exactly. Well, and one of my favorite quotes, so I love boundaries and I'm big on boundaries.
And you're really good at them. It's really annoying.
Yeah, I really am. And my buddy Fred Rogers talked about boundaries a lot and how important it is for children. Because if you have, like, for me, the idea of like being hard on yourself really just comes down to the firmness with which you set the boundary. Right? So here's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
So if it's like, it's not so much about like, if I don't, like, screens off at 9 p.m., right? Like, let's say that's a boundary that I set for myself. Right? That is not my actual boundary, but let's just say, right?
Yeah.
Where I find it really, really effective to be tough is to be uncompromising in the terms of that boundary. So not 9:05, not 9:15, not let me send one more text. It's at 8:50, you start to wrap up your conversations, and whatever level on the video game you're on, find a save point so that at 9, the screen is just off. There's no loaded emotionalness. There's no, I really wish I had 5 more. No, the screen just goes off at 9. Yeah. That's it. Right? And I think that sort of toughness is really, really beneficial. Where I think go ahead.
I don't know that I agree with that, because where is the built-in room for when you don't? Like, say you just lost track of time and it's 9:10 and you're like, oh shit, and you turn off. Because I think the response that a lot of people have in response to an event like that, even if it's accidental and not necessarily like renegotiating with themselves the boundary, right?
Right.
Then the response to that can, and I think frequently is like, you fucking idiot, you should have said this, you should have done that. You know what I mean? Like when you do cross the boundary, the response can be, so one of the ways, I guess, one of the things I really appreciate about you, and I also don't understand because it's not my lived experience, is that your internal monologue, your internal dialogue is one that is so kind and compassionate and encouraging and supportive. And the majority of people do not experience that, and they have to actively teach themselves that. Right. So like if I cross a boundary that I've set for myself, my default is like, and of course I hear my mother's voice, like, and just like a stream of criticisms, right? And I have to learn to be kind to myself instead of like to be that loving parent instead of that critical parent.
Right. Well, so I love the example that you brought up because it isn't right. So if it's like you hit 9 o'clock and then you start the negotiating and you're like, I know it's 9 o'clock, but I really want to do, that's where you get into trouble. But sometimes we lose track of time, right? You're like,
life happens.
Oops, 9:10. Sorry, gotta go by. It's my bedtime. I really need to wrap this up. I promise to respond in the morning, right? Send the last couple of texts. Don't be an asshole to people. Hit save or don't or whatever, and then you're like, all right, fair enough. I lost track of time. The easiest way for me, and again, this is a pretty recent thing, and I'm not always great at it even today. But if I'm like, okay, I lost track of time, fair enough, it happens. The trick is once I'm aware of it, doing the thing I know I'm supposed to do.
Okay, yeah.
Right, and being like, I can't go back 10 minutes, and right, like that is not how I as a human experience time, right?
That's such a great qualifier.
Right? Because a lot of say that that's not how time works, but my
no, that was spot on. I love it.
Right? So then I'm like, okay, great. I missed. Let me shut down the things. Go to bed. Let me at least get, if I'm like, let's say my rule is screens off at 9, asleep by 10, right? Well, all right. I kind of missed getting my full hour in of no screen time before bed, but I did 50 minutes. 50 minutes is a lot better than certainly nothing.
Right.
But it's even better than like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. 50 minutes is still pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, all right, let me get in what I can. Fair enough. And then over time, I'll like, if I find like in the course of a week, if I lose track of time 3 or 4 times, right? But it's just by 10 or 15 minutes, then I can just change the boundary. I can go, okay, clearly the 9 o'clock boundary is not
right. Yeah. Or do something else like, okay, I need to set an alarm so that it goes off at 8:45 so that I'm aware of the time, or like, that kind of. But like you would negotiate in what I call like a emotionally sober state, right?
Yes.
You negotiate at a time when you're not feeling that boundary, but when you can actually think clearly about that boundary.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Negotiate when you are not, because if you're feeling the boundary, then
you're not going to be,
there's no way.
You're going to have the conflict of your FI and TE or whatever your functions may be. Yeah,
whatever your functions may be, or even, the N and the S of like, the boundary where I find that I get messed up is, and again, I've had to really learn to be very mindful of not saying should.
Right. I think we talked about that.
Because of the like, well, the boundary really should be 9:50. Right. I should be allowed to whatever. And because I'm a grown-ass man, the boundary can be whatever I want.
Right.
And in fact, one of the boundaries that I had to set for myself was not living on the East Coast, because I couldn't go to, like, I was staying
You
up.
couldn't honor your other.
I couldn't. I couldn't, like, because of the world happens in real time, right?
And it's New York.
Right. If I wanted to watch the State of the Union that starts at 9:15, well, then now I can't.
Oh.
Now I can't honor. So, you know, I'm an actor. I love watching the Oscars. I love watching award shows. The Oscars come on at 5 in LA.
Out here. Yeah.
Right? It's amazing. I watched the Oscars. Like, I had the afternoon. I watched the red carpet. I live down the street from the Dolby Theater. So I was like, I know where that is. Hey, right? You're very Italian. I watched the Oscars, apparently.
Yeah, apparently the New Yorker in you came out.
Yeah, right, a little bit. But it's done by 8 or 8:30.
Right, and you can...
Like, oh, great, the Oscars are done at like 8:15, 8:30. Great, I can still have a little bit of a conversation, play some video game, do whatever, and then...
turn in.
What's that?
And then turn in. Yeah, and still respect your boundaries.
Right, and I still get to respect my boundaries and get to do the things that I want to do. Right? But that was a boundary that I found myself having to constantly negotiate when I was on the East Coast. Negotiating the, like, I know I should be going, it was like I should be going to bed combined with I should be able to stay up later. And I was like, wait a minute, hang on a second. That is not how any of this works.
Right. So I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit towards, like, I guess, what is your definition? What is our definitions? What are our definitions of alphaness? Like, because, like you said, that's a loaded term. Just if we take it in isolation, it's a very loaded term.
My definition is super, super simple. And it's a phrase that I've said on the show many times. I've said it personally many times. I say it to everybody. It is the best advice I've ever gotten. One's alphaness is simply one's ability to be appropriate to the situation. That's it.
I find that to be utterly vague. What does appropriate mean?
Sure. So
to be appropriate to the situation. Interesting. Okay.
So it is deliberately vague, but I think the core of it means being present, being mindful, not living in should land, not living in this realm of, like, well, I want to be able to give my full. So the example happened. It was the commencement speech. The clouds were coming in. Wynton Marsalis was supposed to give a big 18-page speech, and he gets up on stage, and we're about to get shut down because we're about to get poured on on this football stadium. And he gets up and he says, "If there's one thing I learned in jazz, it's to be appropriate to the situation. So therefore, I'm going to read the first page and the last page so that we can finish the ceremony on time and so that we can get you out of the rain before the rain starts. The full speech will be available online. You can read it. I encourage you to read it. But for right now, we only have time for me to read the first page and the last page." Right?
Okay.
That, to me, is fucking alpha incarnate. Because what an immature person would do, or might do, is go, you know what? I came here to give a goddamn graduation speech. I'm going to give my speech. Fuck all y'all who are in the rain.
Right.
I'm here to give a speech.
What if that is somebody who has a VRTE and that is the appropriate situation there, but, like, when it comes to dealing with their FI, just shits all over it and doesn't deal with it?
Well, so right away, that is somebody who is not being appropriate to the situation. If you are shitting on any function, your ability to be appropriate to the situation diminishes, and it becomes much, much harder to be appropriate to the situation if you cannot respect every single function, regardless of your ability.
Well, yes, I completely agree. Interesting. I don't think I agree with that definition, but it's an interesting perspective.
What's yours?
I think I think the NI thread that is running through what we're discussing about is exactly the same. I think it's just the way that we are choosing our words is different.
Sure.
I haven't given this any thought, which is weird because I'm the one who asked the question. Leave it to the EP, right? Salty Peanut wrote, maybe allowing the tribe to define what is appropriate. That's an interesting perspective. I think maybe that's the element of alpha, your definition of alphaness, that I kind of don't know that I agree with, is the appropriateness, because I think that is completely and utterly vague and subjective, which you said is like intentionally so.
Yes. And now here's the other thing. It could have been appropriate to the situation for somebody to go, for him to have gone, you know what? I don't know what his speech was about. I don't remember what it was about. But his speech was about being willing to accept the rainstorms in life. Like, let's say he had some metaphor about that, right? Here's what I say appropriate to the situation. Being able to look at all of the options, and make a decision based on what you believe the best decision to be is, rather than it's easier for me to do this, I want to do this, this person will like, right? It's being able to go, okay, here's the TI answer, here's the FE answer, here's the TE answer, here's the FI answer. Stepping back from all of those, what is the best course of action? And being like, fuck. In this case, like for me, if I look back and I'm like, man, it's a TI thing. All right, guess I got a TI.
Right.
That to me is right, given the given circumstances, even if it would be easier for me to FI, if I would prefer to TE, being able to set those preferences aside and set my attachments to my functions aside, and really go, because I even said earlier, when we were talking about alphaness and pain, I said, do what works for you.
Yeah.
Which is a very TI way to phrase that.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm like, as much as I would love to say, well, this is what feels good to me, and this is what works for most people, so try this first. No, I recognize that's not the right answer. At least I do not perceive that to be the correct answer. I perceive TI to be the right answer.
Right. And so that's what yes.
Right. And so that could be wrong. Like, you can still be an alpha and make the wrong choice. And I think that that's really, really critical. Being an alpha does not mean that you do the right thing all the time. It doesn't mean that you make the right decision. It does not mean that you execute well. Being an alpha means, regardless of what you want to do, your ability to do what you believe is right.
What needs to be done.
And not even, well, again, now that feels even a slight bias towards
DE. Yeah.
Slight bias towards DE, but
I mean, yes, I think the language has a DE connotation to it.
But you know what I mean. On the same page. But yeah, the ability to set aside one's own.
So this goes right into one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and is what I think I decided to name this episode is surrender and surrendering. And so I find that concept to be very interesting, and I'm still very much figuring out my own understanding of it, as well as how to live it. But I think so. I need to. So there's this like, a lot of people, I would say, if you look at some kind of pack animal, right, where our definition of alphaness is coming from, right? Like you have a pack of wolves or something like that. There's going to be one who is running the pack kind of thing. And then all of the other ones, was that a disagreement or was that just doing something?
That's not how science works anymore, but I understand the concept.
Well, yes, but like, yes. So that's where like, that's where we get the term. But the idea there is that like the other animals are kind of surrendering their will to whoever the alpha is because they believe the alpha will allow the pack to survive, will make decisions that will allow the pack to survive, right?
Sure.
And I think on the whole, humans, despite our, so this might be a rather contentious opinion, despite our
opinion, I'm fucking in.
We're so a couple of infodoms here. Despite how much conversation there is around things like free will and ability to choose and things like that, I think humans on the whole don't actually want to make decisions because there is a tremendous amount of responsibility that comes with it. And so I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people turn to things like religion, because it is in some ways an abdication of decision making, whether you're savior DE, savior DI, doesn't matter. You're abdicating whatever that is to a higher power for that to guide your decisions, right? And so you are in that way, you're abdicating that responsibility. You're saying like, oh, I don't need to decide what is good and what is bad. I will follow God's dictation of what is good and what is bad.
Sure.
And I think that kind of, I lost my train of thought.
So this is where I have a tough time wrapping my head around it, because I've never not wanted to make a decision. I have always wanted tons of responsibility and the ability
to save your blaster. You blast at the top, right? And of course, this is coming from, Demon Blast and like an EP, like I don't want to make decisions. I want somebody else to make decisions. But I also think like, and there's definitely some of that is coming from type, without a doubt. But I think things like religion, when it's kind of like one of those things that if you were in a life and death situation, say, I don't know, post-apocalypse, there's zombies everywhere.
Love it.
And in some situations, you might have the skill set and the knowledge to best help you and your people, whoever you're with, survive. Or it might be somebody else. How would you navigate a situation like that?
Whoever makes the best decision. Like, here's the thing. If I just care that we get the best outcome. Right? Oftentimes, I tend to have pretty good ideas when it comes to these sorts of things. Right? If someone has a better idea, I am thrilled to let them.
TIs are probably like, no.
Now, but here's sort of where I cheat. I'm going to call it cheating for the purposes of the conversation, because it has been my observation and experience that there is nothing more powerful that a leader can do than to direct the energy of the tribe to somebody else who he feels is more qualified. Here's what I'm talking about.
Yes, I'm with you, 100% with you.
Right?
Yes.
There, like, you want to talk about a fucking power play. It's going, so this is an absolutely true story. This happens all the time in theater rehearsals. You have a bunch of actors and everybody's goofing off and standing around, and it can get, if the music director and the director, if they're disagreeing about something and the energy gets a little loose, it gets a little watery. Well, when the director has to get everybody's attention, it's not always the easiest thing in the world, right? But there's always this, it's always on the star. And what this, you see it all the time, is the director's like, all right, guys, we're ready to come back. What the star will do is they will just focus, laser their attention on the director. Because they know that they got the fancy name, they're Tony winner, whatever the fuck. And that what they set the energetic tone. Right. So they're like, oh shit.
So where they give their attention is where everyone else is going to give their attention.
So even though they're not in charge in the moment, they are energetically in charge, and they recognize their responsibility to go, oh no, guys, we all need to listen to this person.
Right.
And if I tell you to do that, then I'm usurping that person, which is not the right play. So my job is to simply lead the pack, point them in this direction, and then just fucking hold that energy on the director and be like, I'm looking at you. They will get on board whenever they can, but I need the director to know that they are running
the show. They have my attention. Yeah.
They have my attention, and I have their attention. So therefore, I am giving their attention to you. That's a fucking power play.
Yeah, agreed.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how I say, because you asked, like, well, how do I navigate that? Like, you know, I have some ideas and I'm in charge, but they want to be in charge, whatever.
Right, because there's no ego in play.
Yeah.
You do whatever is best.
Do whatever is best, and
whatever is working for everyone.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever's in that particular situation, whatever's working for everyone, right? Because that is a group situation, so the DE trumps the DI, right? There are also times, right, flipping it and being able to say, you know what, this feels like it should be a DE situation, but it's actually everybody kind of doing their own thing. Okay, well then I need to set the energetic tone by just doing my thing and focusing on my lane, right?
It can also be like, I think in that kind of situation where like it's a tribe situation, but maybe acting from the DI is a more appropriate thing. I think this is where, like, you know, Milgram's experiments, and like when we talk about like a lot of the research that was done after World War II in terms of that like groupthink and things like that. It's in situations like that is very hard to do when like everyone is on board with something, but you see in some way it is contrary to a value or a truth or something like that. Yeah. And it is hard and takes a tremendous amount of courage to speak up and do otherwise. But in that situation, that is what is, I guess, to your point, appropriate.
Right. So that's a really interesting, right? So let's say zombie apocalypse time, right? And it's like, you know, we gotta...
Yo, there's a dead body here. Let's eat it.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So that's the sort of thing. So I guess the way that I navigate that and the way that I see the people that I respect wouldn't, how I imagine people I respect would navigate that situation. Right? Being able to go, okay, currently there does not exist a boundary, cultural, energetic, social, physical, whatever, that prevents us, the group, from eating that body, right? So right now, it's going to cause conflict and friction and strife, and it's not going to get it done. It's not going to achieve any goal trying to fight this thing right now.
Sorry, Laura's on.
Hi, Laura. Right? And then, after we eat the dead body, or as we're eating the dead body, then it is my responsibility as the tribe member, let's say I'm not the leader, right? To be like, hey, leader, I would love it. I'd love to have a conversation about this eating dead body thing. I don't love it. I don't think we need to be living this way. I think there are other things that we can be doing, right? Debrief after the fact and reevaluate the boundary, reassess the boundary, right? Don't cause a riot in the middle of people being hungry. That's not productive or helpful, right? And then if I find myself stonewalled on, afterwards, and they're like, no, we eat dead bodies. We are a dead body eating people. Blah, 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 blah. And then I go, all right, I tried to be responsible. I tried to not make a big fuss about this. The next time this happens, I'm gonna fucking say something. And then I got to do what's right for me. Right?
Yeah. I'm just thinking through
Sure.
all of the details of the situation. I'm trying to remember what like, so it's interesting. After one of the times that I was up in Portland and hung out with Dave and Shan on my drive back down, that's when this surrendering thing came to mind, and it made such crystal clear sense. Yeah. And now it's like water. Like, I just can't hold on to it.
Sure. Okay.
I think a big part of it is this, like, so I think regardless of whether you're Savior DI or Savior DE.
Yes.
So, we have all of the needs, right? And we talk about the need for variety, the need for stability, EP, IJ, the need for connection, and the need for significance, right?
Sure. Love it.
But then there's two other needs: to grow and to give. Right.
Sure.
And I think Alphaness is very tightly intertwined with that, because I think a lot of us spend a lot, probably depending on whether we have Savior DE or DI, spend a lot of time either on the giving or a lot of time on the growing, and don't balance those really well.
Sure.
And I think what happens is that, so there's this really interesting research when it comes to happiness, which, just a quick aside, the fact that Laurie Santos is my type twin is just like so interesting, considering the content that she teaches. But anyway, when it comes to happiness, one of the things that, one of the really big, like, game changers in terms of how fulfilled somebody feels in their life is whether or not they feel like they have purpose. Right.
Yeah.
Whether.
Well, and Jonathan Haidt even talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose as being like the three.
Who does?
Jonathan Haidt, I think is his name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He talks about what?
So he has a great TED Talk from about 10 years ago where he talks about.
I love everything that comes out of that man's mouth. Yes.
But he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose as being the three kind of things that you need to feel like. You need to feel like your choices are your own, and that the way in which you co-create with whatever it is around you, that your impact matters. You have to feel like you're good at what you're doing and that you have mastery over it, or are in the process of achieving mastery, and that the way in which you direct your energy is meaningful to something beyond yourself.
Interesting. Yeah. I've heard various variations of those same three.
They're all in the same.
Yeah. In this case, what I'm thinking of in terms of purpose is like, okay, so say you have somebody who is Savior DE, somebody who's just running on their default wiring and is just like, all saviors. Sure. Somebody who has Savior DE will probably have something purposeful, so to speak, that they have spent a lot of their life working on whatever it is that the tribe needs, and putting a lot of time and effort into that. But because of the demon DI, and because they haven't been giving their DI very much attention, whatever that thing that they give, that they're doing for the tribe, might not be in alignment with their DI. And they might not be doing it through intention, but rather reaction and automaticity, right? And so they're shitting on their DI in that way. Sure. Now, the flip side of that is you have somebody who is Savior DI, and they're like, yeah, this is the thing that's important, and this is super like valuable, and we got to go with this. But then they don't actually check in with the tribe, see how the tribe is reacting, and they might not be actually doing much to bring that into reality. And they're just like all up in their own shit, Sure. So the balance between those two is when you are able to do something with intention. So it's coming from your DI because you are actively choosing that this is the most important thing, or, the thing that has a core truth to it. I still don't really quite get DI. And it also has value for the tribe, or it's making life better for the tribe in some capacity, right?
Yes.
And that, when those two come together, is like purposeful work. And so when I think about surrendering, I think about surrendering to that purpose, whatever that purpose is. Once you've figured out like that this is, so for example, in some capacity, Dave and Shan, I feel like, have in some ways surrendered to this idea that bringing ops into the world and helping people through ops is their purpose, and they've surrendered themselves to that purpose. So whatever other wants or desires or tangents that come up in the process of serving that purpose and surrendering to that purpose become kind of like, they just roll off because they have surrendered themselves to this greater, like, to something that is greater than themselves, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Whereas before you surrender, then there is a lot of more I don't know, like, I guess variability in making decisions. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. No. I see. I think
it's like the grow and the give, right? If you're growing, the give is all towards the same purpose. Then you just like everything kind of aligns and you triangulate, and then everything is going towards whatever that thing may be. And that thing can be, mind you, as like vague or specific as you want, as long as it's something outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think that when we're, how I sort of am interpreting this idea of surrender, it's not just on the decider axis, it can also be on the observer axis, right?
Yes.
And it's very much making the conscious, mindful, deliberate effort to double whatever, right? So whether it's double decide or double observe.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right? It's being able to go, okay, I see the DI, like, this is the DI choice. This is the DE-centric choice. This is the OI-centric choice. This is the OE-centric choice, right? And being able to, like, I surrender my attachment.
Yes. Thank you. I think that's part of the, like, my ego is not involved in this anymore kind of thing. Because ultimately all of our saviors are just like for some kind of ego, for more dopamine or whatever it might be.
Right. And being able to look at it and go, sort of, okay, this is really dumb math, right? But being able to go, okay, so I have, let's say I'm, it's 70%, I'm at a 70 on my two savior functions, and I'm at a 30 on my, demon functions, right?
Right.
Like stronger muscles and weaker muscles, shorthand like that. Okay, being able to go, okay, ideally I would be able to use both of my weaker muscles, but I don't think that that's actually going to serve, like, let's say it's consume for me, right? We're doing this, like, man, it's going to require more consume than my muscles can handle, right? Just because my capacity for consume,
because they're weak. They're
just weaker. So I'm like, okay, I recognize that doing a lot of consume is ideal for the situation, but I know I can't do it as much. So let me start with consume, tax those muscles first because those are the most important ones, and then from there reevaluate and see what the better muscles to use are, right?
Okay.
So I tie that into the whole ego thing because you're taking away this component of, I wish I could use this muscle. I should be able to this. I want to do that, right? And all of these,
eyes.
That's where you get fucked up, rather than looking, because you can I can still look at a situation and go, you know, this situation demands more consume. I acknowledge that reality. I am tapped out of consume spoons. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have more consume in me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to make the mindful, reality-based choice to blast, recognizing that this isn't optimal, but I'm also recognizing the reality that I don't have consume spoons left.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I love that you're going with the spoon analogy. I know what you mean.
Right? And again, that to me is also a reality of like, you know, I definitely have found myself in this pandemic running out of tribe connection, you know, being like, no, I need. So I'm thinking about like, you know, the work that I'm doing, and I'm applying for freelance jobs and YouTube channel, like I'm doing a bunch of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've become really aware of is that for me, I need something that feels like a stream of collaboration. So I need pingback, even if it's negative, right? I loved auditioning in person for things because I would walk in, I'd sing my face off. At that point, I don't really give a shit if I get a callback or not, or even if they like me. It was, I did a thing and I was able to get that sort of like, you know, that red receipt of like, yes, I have seen your audition. Right?
Right.
That was plenty for me. And I'm realizing that like when I make self-tapes or make YouTube videos, I don't always get that immediate pingback. Great. Right. Love it. I am not going to impose that need onto this medium because it's not built for that. Right? Okay. But that doesn't mean that need doesn't need to get filled.
Yes.
So I'm honoring the reality that making YouTube videos and hitting refresh to see if you got that one extra view or it showed up in search or whatever, that's not productive. That's not helpful. That's not going to get you where you want to go. Right?
Right.
But so that is one reality that I need to honor. The other reality I need to honor is that I need collaboration. I need pingback, and I need that flow of like, I do a little bit, somebody tells me, somebody acknowledges that I did something in some context.
Right.
So I also need that. And maybe those two intersect, maybe they don't. But I am surrendering to the reality of this is work I want to do, and these are needs that I need met.
Yes.
Sometimes they don't align, and it's my responsibility to get my needs met, even if it doesn't happen in an arena that I think it should or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think this, I think this goes back to something that we've touched on in the past, but I don't think it's come up here. So one of the things, and I haven't been consuming much of Dave and Shan's content for like at least a year and a half, probably longer. So I don't know if their narrative has shifted, but one of the things that I know that they used to talk about in the past is this idea that like, you know, you have to starve your saviors so that you can give your demons more. And that's another one of the areas where I disagree with them, because I don't think it's about starving your saviors, because at the end of the day, you still have all of the needs and you still need to have all of the needs met. It's not about starving that savior. It's about not getting stuck in it. It's about not getting stuck in a gear. It's like, okay, so you have the need for pingback. That's great. That's fantastic.
Yes.
If you pretended you don't have that need anymore, you will end up slowly wilting.
Yes.
But what you don't want to do is only pursue that need to the detriment of everything else.
Right.
The best way forward is, I have this need, I'm going to pursue it, but I'm not only going to pursue this need. Okay, I got some pingback that gives me enough energy. Now I can go and do some consume or whatever it is.
Totally.
And going through and hitting all of your animals and making that cycle.
Yeah.
faster rather than just starving the top, hoping you get more out of the bottom.
Right. So my big philosophy shift that happened sort of, I would say mid-May, like as I was approaching my 35th birthday, and I had this very
like a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, oh, I get it. And it was why I quit Facebook. It's why I started to make a lot of nutritional changes, whatever. I believe in my soul of souls that the universe is abundant and awesome. I think that all of existence is extraordinary. I have an incredibly positive view of the framework in which we exist. I think it's all fucking amazing.
Agreed.
So, operating from that premise, it's simply a matter of recognizing. So it's not about starving your saviors and hoping your demons catch up and aren't traumatized by what you're doing to them. Right. It's about recognizing, oh my God, nourishment comes in so many forms.
Right.
Fat is nourishing. Protein is nourishing. Vegetables are nourishing. Starch is nourishing. Water is nourishing. Right. All of these things. And it's about seeing the nourishment in all of these. I'm choosing a food analogy because that's what I've been thinking about lately. It's about choosing to see the ways in which every macro nourishes you. Now, when you get into the specifics, I've been really into white rice lately because I've learned how to portion it. I've learned how to eat it properly, eat it as part of a balanced meal. I love it, right?
Right.
That doesn't mean that rice is good or bad or whatever. It means that I have learned for me how to get the most out of rice.
Right.
Right? But the only way that I was able to do that is to start with the premise of, you know what? Grains are useful. Grains provide nourishment. They're not inherently devoid of nutrition.
Right.
And the onus is on I have the privilege and responsibility, phrase that I like a lot. I have the privilege and responsibility to find the grains that nourish me. I have the privilege and responsibility of finding the vegetables that nourish me. I have the privilege and responsibility of finding the protein and fat that nourishes me, and to seek those out and to experiment and try new things, but also once I have found something I know works, to stick with that thing. And operating from the premise of, if you only eat protein, if I only eat pork tenderloin, my 1,500, 1,700, whatever calories of just pork tenderloin, I'm not actually nourishing myself. In the same way that if I only ate vegetables with the workout routines that I'm doing, I would not be getting enough protein in my diet.
Right.
So starving either one of those needs does not make sense. It is actually pretty demonstrative.
It's not actually bringing you closer to your goals, whatever those may be.
No. But I do think, so the thing that really changed my mindset about vegetables and food and nutrition in particular is they're start with filling half of your plate with vegetables. Right? And then from there, because there is protein in broccoli and Brussels, whatever.
Yeah.
And you're as long as half the plate is vegetables, then I can put whatever protein I want. The plate will not fit, too much rice or a detrimental amount of grain or fat or whatever else I'm doing. Right. Okay. And it's going, I'm not depriving myself of my saviors. It's that I'm training my brain and my body to see the nutritional value in my demons.
Yes.
It's training myself to go, hey, because here's the thing. We're a great example of this. Lead NT blast, lead SF consume. Right? I'm nourished by blast. You're nourished naturally by consume. Well, okay, then demonstrably both blast and consume contain nourishment. And And so it's just on us, it's on me to go, how does consume nourish me? How much consume do I need to nourish?
Yes.
My mother.
And in which context is it nourishing and when is it not? And I think this is like, okay, so this is fresh on my mind because I just watched it yesterday. You know, the Laurie Santos class that Dave and Shan did. And then they initially typed her as me, but blast last. And I sent them an email being like, yeah, are you sure? And they were like, no, yeah, you're right. She's actually play last. And I was watching that video. And one of the things that they talk about is that like, one of the reasons they missed the play last in her and somebody else who they typed recently is because when the play is within somebody's sleep box or within someone's DI box, then like you're not going to know that it's play last necessarily, right? And it's in that same way that like if it is something that is nourishing for you in this context, then like hell yeah, you're going to go into it with no problems, right? But if you try to force your body to eat vegetables when you're already full, even if it's vegetables and something really good for you, if you're already full, it's not going to be good for your body. It's not going to be nourishing for your body, right? So there's context specific times when something is good and something is not good. And that's kind of where I think ALPS is super powerful, is that like it helps me understand that yeah, I shit all over play without a doubt. But when the play is within my NIFI box, my play is super powerful. Right. In the same way that like you, I'm sure, shit on your sleep. But when you sleep on things that you have already like SETE experienced, then your sleep can be really powerful as well because it refocuses where your SETE is pointing.
Exactly. And I would say that I would say at this point in my life, I don't shit on my sleep.
Not the way that I'm sure you did 3 years ago, in the same way that
for me now, it's just a like, oh, I'm low, like I haven't done the sleep thing. I need to refill the sleep gauge, and I now understand how sleep fits into my overall psychology and way I move through the world. Much in the same way that like, so I think about my mother and I and how we have very different dietary needs. So she's probably some kind of double feminine or visual, feminine sensory lead Effie, right? Possibly SEFE play, SEFI black, something in that realm, right? But definitely feminine sensory. She's very visual, very bird boned, and doesn't eat a lot of food. Her body is pretty bad at processing fat. It's okay at processing protein. But it can process carbohydrates like a motherfucker.
And for somebody else, that might be the exact thing that destroys him.
If I ate the way that my mother ate and vice versa, we would be a mess. We would get wrecked, right? And I have now learned that I'm like, okay, my body is very good at processing protein. My body is better than you would think at processing fat. It's obviously, it fucking loves vegetables, which is really annoying, but whatever. Like, oh my God, roasted vegetables, but again, with a lot of fat, a lot of olive oil, a lot of salt, a lot of right?
With you on that.
Right? So it can eat vegetables all day. It can eat, I actually don't get chicken breasts anymore because they're not fatty enough, because my body can't process all of that protein without the fat. Right? But when it comes to grain, it's like, yeah, 1/3 of a cup of cooked rice is plenty. I don't need or want more than that for me and my body. And if I give my body, if I ignore the rice completely, okay, that's maybe bad. If I ignore the carbs completely, that's not good. But the limit beyond which it serves me, I hit that limit pretty soon.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's also an element of, so I've shared this analogy before, but like the animals as filters, right? So if you have you're trying to filter some water and it's coming in as super muddy, right? You have different filters that it goes through different layers, like, might be stone and then sand and then like coal, and then like you might get some clean water out on the other side, right? And the objective is to get the clean water out. And if you only go through the stone, it's going to get completely stuck in just the stone and the sand, right? If you're just doing your saviors over and over and over again, you're never actually going all the way through and you're not getting clean water out on the other side. And the objective is to get clean water on the other side, right? So, but at the same time, you can't just skip the stone and the sand and go straight down to the charcoal and think you're going to get clean water. That's not going to work either. And that idea of just like, hey, starve your saviors, feels like you're just skipping the first two steps. And I don't think it works that way.
And here's where I think it's particularly dangerous. If it were, because I don't think that it wouldn't work. Like, because charcoal would be a little porous. So if I pour water on charcoal, eventually, if I keep re-pouring the water through the charcoal, eventually I would get clean water.
Well, so the thing is that like the earlier layers have their own purpose, right? If you keep if you take a bunch of water and your only filter is charcoal and you pour it over that, all of the debris that's in the water is going to end up sitting on top of the charcoal, and so it's going to get like clogged, and you're not going to get nearly as much through down to the charcoal.
That's what I mean.
If that makes sense, right? So sure, you can do it, but it's not it's not an efficient system, and B, it's going to get fucked up. It's not going to continue working for you. Sooner or later, you're going to have to go and be like, well, shit, why isn't my water coming out? Like I'm pouring water in, but nothing's coming out. What is going on?
Well, and I think now I understand the water filter analogy and I fucking love it. Where I think the real first like mindset shift needs to happen, or where I find it really beneficial to happen, is where people get stuck, is they'll pour the water through this. So what do we have? We had stones, and then we had, what was the second layer?
Sand.
Stone, sand, and
charcoal.
Okay, great. Let's just arbitrarily, and I don't know how water works. Whatever.
I think it's something like that. Yeah.
Something like this. So the problem is when you filter it through stone and sand, or God forbid, just stone, and you think the product
that's clean water.
That's clean water, right?
And that's not good.
And you're like, oh no. Some of that is perspective. If you haven't seen actual clean water before, then you have no way of knowing what clean water is supposed to look like.
Yes, I find that like that's a great example. So for some of my TEEJ friends, because of their FI at the bottom, especially the sleep last ones, I've seen this very frequently among them. They'll be in a relationship and they think that like, oh, hey, this is great. Yeah, I'm ready to marry this person. And not realizing the depth of connection that they can have with another person because their FI is so removed from them. Right. And they think that this is clean water. And then one day it's going to slam them in the fucking face that like, hey, you've been drinking shitty, muddy water all this time. And this is what clean water tastes like.
This is what clean water tastes like. And to bring it back to the
and it's like, oh my God, now my body feels, back to your nourishment analogy, my body feels nourished now that I'm actually have clean water instead of this muddy stuff.
Yeah. And being able to, thinking of OP as like, hey, you have to do stone, you do the stone and sand, hundo P. Just don't forget to put the charcoal in there.
Yes.
Right? And it's not, again, where you get into trouble is if you don't put the charcoal in and you're like stone, sand, you get the water, and then you pour that water on top of the stone and sand again.
Yes.
And you keep getting the same result. And you're like, I keep fucking putting it through my filtration system and it's not getting
better.
Yeah. Like, because you have to do the charcoal too. Well, I don't know how to do charcoal. It's all good. Do a shitty version of charcoal first.
So the savior play.
Don't even trip. Just start using charcoal in your process, period. Listen,
No, yes, agreed. Or adjust your expectations. Like, don't think you're going to get potable water if you're not using charcoal.
Right.
I have no idea if that's true.
That's
but
true.
You know what I mean? Like, adjust your expectations that, like, hey, if I only filter it through pebbles and sand, then I'm going to get water that I can take a bath in, but I'm not going to get water that I'm going to make tea with, or something like that, you know?
And quite frankly, I think that it is, I'm just going to say dumb to use distilled water for bath water. Like why?
Yes. You're not going to need to put it through all of those resources if you're not going to use it in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if I'm just taking a bath, don't fucking use charcoal. That's dumb and inefficient and a waste of charcoal and time. Use bath water for bath water and use drinking water for drinking water. Like that. Yeah. So to bring it back to be appropriate to the situation, it's recognizing, is this a bathwater situation or is this a distilled water situation, a tea water situation?
Right. Yes.
Right. And if it's a tea water situation, being appropriate to that situation and filtering the water commensurate with what you need to make tea.
Yes.
Right.
This is something that popped into my head earlier with regards to, you know, your Alphaness definition is the ability to be appropriate to the situation. I think that purposefulness is the thing that felt missing from it, because I feel like if you know what your grow and give is, if you know what your purpose is, then all of a sudden you have a North Star that dictates whether you are being appropriate to the situation. Right. But without some kind of North Star, without knowing where you're at and where you're trying to go, you have no way of gauging whether you're being appropriate to the situation or not.
Exactly. And again, you might be wrong. Like your perception of what is appropriate to the situation might not be correct.
Right.
Like, and you might be bad at it. But at the very least,
being bad at something is the step. Like you gotta be.
So like, you know, it's and again, when you have that purpose, I think it becomes a lot easier to be humble and to be able to go. Okay, so Jessica and I went bowling yesterday. It was great. I haven't been bowling in 20 years. I had the time of my life bowling. But it was, and there were lots of shots that just weren't good.
Yeah.
And I could feel, I was like, ooh, tell you what, I got real lucky with that one. I should not have gotten 8 pins. Right? And at one point, she was like, oh, you know what I think might help is getting more speed on the ball. And I was like, right, I can throw the ball faster. And if I generate more speed with the weight of the ball, then entropy has a better chance of giving me the result that awesome. Great. Thank you so much. And I didn't have this like need to be right or need to be good at, I was like, listen, I just want to knock down as many pins as possible. My purpose and my North Star right now, in addition to having a good time, you know, with my girlfriend, her, but in the competitive sense, when I'm trying to bowl, I just want to knock down as many pins as possible.
Right.
Whatever gets me closer to doing that, great, amazing. I don't need to have been right in the past. I just need to be more right in the future.
Right. Yes. And I think that's much easier to do when whatever you're doing is not attached to your ego. Because I think this is where things like fear, shame, pain, all of those more complex negative emotions start coming up is when they're attached to our ego or there's some story that we're telling ourselves. Yeah. And I think this is where that element of surrender comes in, is because you're surrendering, like, if you're surrendering to a purpose, then there's no place for ego in it. Right. Because it's just whatever helps you bring that purpose closer. Yeah. And when you're a beginner in something, or like, you know, bowling or something like that, there's no ego involved in that because you haven't done it in 20 years and who the fuck cares? Right. You're just there to have fun and get better at it. Right.
Now, okay, so I've never really understood like the concept of like I've never had a good definition, but what I'm hearing of ego.
Oh, okay.
Right, because I'm like, well, self-centeredness, is that a deal? I don't know. But to me, ego the way that you're describing it in the unhealthy way is wishing that the past were different, right? In the
I don't know
sense
if I would
that,
agree with that, but okay, keep
well,
going.
in at least in some ways, right? Being
Yes.
like, oh, I wish I were better at, like, I wish, I wish I had done different things. I wish I had more bowling skills. Well, let me protect that self-preservation, whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And again, being able to go, this is how good I am at bowling right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I just want to get better at it. If there is something, if there's information I need, if there's practice I need to do to get better at it, that's not a referendum on the past, which I can't change because as how a human experiences time, right? So I'm just going to keep it moving.
Right.
But that to me is distinct from, so I'm learning Japanese on Duolingo right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Super fun. Love it. That is just so, but the way that they structured the program, I don't agree with. I don't think it is an effective pedagogy because you jump from gakko, push the matchy match, whatever, ginko, heya, like it's like word by word, or konnichiwa, put the characters in the right order, right? And then it jumps up to, here is an entire phrase, pick it out of thin air. Oh, with characters that you haven't seen before. And I'm like, and there's a part of me that's like, well, this is dumb, but it's not coming from a place of, I should be able to do this. It's, well, of course I shouldn't be able to do this because my skills aren't there yet. Why did the program make me jump? Like, why is, and so that criticism and that feeling of like, oh, I'm not getting it, isn't coming from I feel like I should be. It's, hang on, no, we structured the program wrong. Like you're not.
The TE here isn't working.
Right. The TE, the NI, the whole thing. But again, it goes back to this idea of what is the purpose? Well, the purpose is to learn Japanese.
Right.
Right. And whatever the most effective, pleasant, however you want to define it, easy inflow way to do that, that's all I care about. Right? I don't, if this is the most effective way, fair enough. I will take your word for it. Touche. As someone with a experience, a decade of professional pedagogy, curriculum building experience, I disagree.
So a quick thing.
Yeah, hit me.
Quick aside, I just noticed that for whatever reason, even though my battery is plugged in, it's down to 7% and keeps dropping.
Fair
so
enough.
We should wind this down.
I love it.
I did want to say though, one of the things as you were going into some of that, and especially that ego element, some of that surrendering reclarified itself. Like it's not quite as liquidy anymore. And I think part of it is that so whatever you decide your purpose is, say, for example, your purpose is to discover a cure for cancer or to bring more joy to people's lives or whatever that may be, right? So in deciding on the purpose, you have agency in it and intention. So in those regards, you're able to access your DI, and that is what is it's triangulating this too, because you get to decide and you also get to see what is needed in the world, right? But then once you have decided that that is your purpose, you surrender yourself to it in the sense that there is no room for ego. There is no room for, oh, I don't wanna. There's no room for this doesn't feel good. There's only room for this is what will bring me closer to that purpose. In the same way that this is what is effective. In the same way that that bowling example that you gave, that it doesn't matter if right now I don't know anything about biology and how human cells work. I will learn, and because that is what I've decided is my purpose, whatever helps me bring me closer. And that's where the grow and the give comes in, because I'm growing myself so that I can better give towards whatever this purpose is that I have decided is what I want to dedicate my life to.
Yeah. No, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And even within that, the like,
and that is I think where are you okay? I'm not completely right now.
Yep.
Okay.
You cut out for a second.
Let's wind this down.
I think that's a good idea. We covered a lot of ground. I definitely see some sort of part 2 about this in the future, because I think that I feel like this was a really good conversation because we clarified so many terms.
Wind it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. V, thank you so much for hanging out today. As always, I love you. I see you. Now let's do the damn thing.
I don't know if I'm trying to end the broadcast. My computer is totally not working. End broadcast.